The Oklahoma Business Show is proudly sponsored by Your IT. Visit yourit.com to learn more about our services and schedule a chat to find out how we can help you. That's yourit.com. You deserve better IT.
I'm Chris Moroz, and welcome to the Oklahoma Business Show, where we speak with business owners and leaders about their struggles, successes, and things they've learned along the way. All right, well, welcome back to the Oklahoma Business Show. Today, I'm delighted to have Christian Brim with us. So Christian is the founder and CEO of Core Group, an Oklahoma-based accounting firm servicing the entire state of Oklahoma and then some.
Currently, we're in 38 states. We have clients in 38 states.
Okay, that's amazing. So thanks for being here. I'm delighted to sit down with you for 45 minutes or an hour and just kind of chat a bit. So
you may regret that.
I might, but I doubt it. Why don't you kick us off with a little bit of a bio that you can do better than I?
Sure. I am approaching the ripe age of 53 this year. We started Core Group. This is our 26th year in business. Started it, actually bought a franchise. There were such things as accounting franchises at the time.
Really? Okay.
Yes. There were several different accounting franchises. There aren't any more that I'm aware of. But it was an interesting business model. But started out and have been doing this most of my professional career. I have a wife that will be married 30 years this year, 3 grown children. As I told you, I just got my private pilot's license. You can't tell from this physique, but I do a lot of endurance races. I've done a half Ironman. I've done a full marathon. You can't tell from looking at it, but I go very slowly.
Well, it's called endurance for a reason.
Right, exactly. It's not fast. This is a completely different race. So been at the same church for 29 years. Same Sunday school class for 27. Lived in Oklahoma all my life. I was born in Shawnee, raised in Enid. I have 4 siblings, all of them younger. One of my brothers was a partner of mine in Core Group for about 10 years. Recently, in the last 2 years, I've taken on some fractional CFO clients, not through Core, but just me individually. And I help those clients do more strategic, high-level finance stuff rather than what Core does, which is more of the bread and butter compliance stuff.
Now, why did you branch that off, though? Why not keep that as a separate or as another line item within Core directly?
Well, it's interesting that my first and only strategy for the first 18 to 20 years of business was grow. And
not a bad strategy.
No, it's not. And it's a very common strategy. But what we ran into is we were way too many things to way too many different people. Very scattered in who we served and what we did for them. And we decided that if we were going to, we just kind of bumped up against the ceiling. We couldn't grow any further. And what we realized is that, what we had was not scalable. And so we made some changes, one of which was we eliminated a bunch of services, got out of a lot of lines of business, fired some clients, sold some parts of the business. And that's why is the short answer that or the long answer of why I didn't want to bring that back in, because we'd spent so much work and effort getting it where we could scale it. I didn't want to confuse anything.
Okay. I think that's interesting. Obviously this whole show is geared towards business owners and business leaders. A lot of those are going to be thinking, how can I add to my business? What else can I add to sell? And so it's really interesting hearing you go that opposite way. Focus is obviously important as a business owner. But how have you found the ability to balance that as the owner, knowing that there's something else you'd like to do that still kind of coincides with the core foundation of core, if I can, but decide to keep those separate?
Well, I think one of the things that I see as I've I deal with small business owners every day, and have for the last 26 years. And one of the common problems I see is entrepreneurs are very quick start. They're driven. What makes them good at entrepreneurs leaves them with some big blind spots, right? And one of those is fairly simple and fundamental, but it's extremely important, is defining success. What is it that you want from your business? Is it a lifestyle that you want, that, a certain amount of money that gives you the lifestyle to live what you want? Are you building it to have more flexibility and time? Are you doing it because you just really have a passion for that thing? Are you doing it because you want to build it and sell it? There are a lot of different options there, really personal to the entrepreneur. But until you clearly define what success looks like, you won't know when you get there. Like, you can be like me and get to this point and have this business, and you're like, this really isn't what I want to do. Like, it's just kind of grown beyond what I wanted. And so really taking the time to re-envision what I wanted, part of that was, what is my role? We have 18 employees, and obviously I don't do everything. So, what do I want my role to be in the business? What do I enjoy? What am I good at? And what am I not good at and don't want to do? But as we redesigned the company, I realized there wasn't a whole lot in the company that I liked doing, right? So that was where the fractional CFO thing came up, because I didn't get those opportunities because I wasn't directly working with clients anymore. And most of our clients, not all of them, but most of them don't have a need for what I do at that CFO level. So it was a conscious decision to do what I want to do, what I enjoy doing, and keeping that balance of my responsibilities at core.
Yeah. And I love to hear that. That's kind of been, you hear that a lot the last few years, a little bit before the pandemic, but obviously in the middle of it. Reinvent yourselves, and this is an opportunity to make changes. Do you think that's something that you could have or would have done 10, 15 years ago? Or is it now, where you are in the stage of your life and your business, you were able to step back and have that conversation with yourself?
I think I could have potentially. Well, I definitely could have potentially. But one of the things that happened was a lot of personal growth. Where that personal growth comes in your life, what causes it, what prompts you to dig into it is different for every individual. There's been a lot of things that I've run across in the last 5 years, and I've questioned myself, why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't I see this? Some of these things seem very obvious. But I think the short answer is I didn't have the self-awareness to know that I needed to be I needed to be looking at those things and looking at those blind spots.
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing that. It's a conversation that I had a lot with myself during the pandemic. I think a lot of people had that same kind of conversation during that time period, just because we were sitting with ourselves for hours upon days that we weren't used to. But hopefully, if people listening haven't had that chance yet, make time and do that, because it's eye-opening and transformational in a lot of ways.
So one of my consistent reads is a gentleman by the name of Perry Marshall. He is a marketing guru. That's his company, but his background was trained as an audio engineer. I mean, I think he was an electrical engineer.
Interesting.
And his approach is very different than most marketers. He's not flashy, but he wrote the book 80-20 Marketing.
Oh, wow, okay.
And it's around the Pareto concept of, 20% of your efforts produce 80% of your results. But he applied that to marketing. And one of the things he talks about is Renaissance time. And it's this concept that you have to intentionally set aside time in your day or your week to explore those things. And how powerful that time, even though it's a small amount of time proportionate to what you do the rest of the week, is in, driving your long-term success. He talks a lot about the concept of predictability and how our brains are wired towards the predictable. And in normal course, you as an individual and certainly as a business owner gravitate to those things where the outcome of your efforts are known. Whether or not that's necessarily productive, it's a known factor. If you do X, you get Y. And the Renaissance time is really about spending time where you don't have any idea what the outcome is going to be. You don't know whether or not the outcome is going to be productive or fruitful. It's just exploring. And hard-driven type A, high D on disk, quick start on Colby, those types of people that the entrepreneurs tend to be. And I certainly didn't have this awareness as a younger entrepreneur. Those are kind of counterintuitive. They seem like, well, that's a waste of time. Yeah. Like, why I could be doing this. Yeah. So it takes a conscious choice to set your mind and set your time aside to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. And few people take the time to do that. So I love hearing other business owners encourage others to do that, because so often it's head down, plow, go, go, go. You got to keep driving. So,
well, and that's what usually makes you successful initially, right? I mean, I remember the first year in business, we were the rookie of the year. We had the best start of any franchise in years. And that first year, it was, I spent 90% of my time selling. And it was a tremendous fear motivation. It was like, I don't know if I'm going to be successful, so I've got to go grind it out. And that's what I'm saying is the natural bent to an entrepreneur that gets them out of their comfort zone to start a business. The flip side of that is that you oftentimes don't create space to ask, are you doing the right things?
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit of a pivot, but when we sat down earlier before we started, you started telling me about how you had just kind of had a little bit of a focus niche in your business that you had. begun to go after. Tell me a little bit more about that and how you came about that specific industry.
So, we 5 years ago, we implemented the Entrepreneur's Operating System, EOS, Gino Wickman Traction. Highly recommend that book to any entrepreneur that hadn't read it.
We will definitely come back to that in a moment.
Okay. One of the components of that is to define your target market. And we had defined it and operated under it. But and this is one of those going back to like, this is so obvious, why didn't you see it before things? It was not, it was not focused enough. It was not small enough. Okay. The definition that we had was way too broad. And the idea of a target market my mindset was, well, it doesn't matter to me whether you do IT services or you're in video production or you're a physician or you're in the manufacturing business. The size of business that we focused on, which was generally under $5 million in revenue, what we do and what the client needs is generally the same. You know, it probably is 80% the same across all industries, and 20% is customized to that industry or business. And so I think that was one of my mindsets in not wanting to narrow the target market further, because I was like, well, that just limits us. But the real purpose of a target market is, in the EOS world, is to define what you're going to spend time, money, and energy on attracting, not necessarily a litmus test to say if somebody that comes to you organically that is not in that target market that you can't take care of them. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to focus your marketing efforts and your dollars and your time. And that 20% difference in industry is where all the juice is, you know, and it, in defining a target market, it actually makes your marketing much, much easier and less costly because you're focusing on that 20%, not the 80%. But we started looking around at, you know, who did we like to work with, right? Who were our favorite clients? Where did we bring the most value? Where did the clients that said, you know, you're awesome sauce? And we made a list and we started looking at the commonalities. And that's where we landed on this creative entrepreneur. And more specifically, the photographers and videographers. Then you had to go back and look, okay, well, is that target market big enough? You know, you can make your target market too small, right? Yeah. In Oklahoma, although we do have a burgeoning video and film industry, it's still nascent. I mean, compared to other markets, it's small. And so it was, well, we can't just focus on Oklahoma videographers and production companies and filmmakers and those, because of editors, because there's not enough. But when you expanded that nationally, it was like, oh, there's plenty. You know, there's plenty here. And that's one of the things COVID actually helped with, because people became more comfortable with the idea of a virtual service provider. Sure. Not having to have a brick and mortar and have to physically meet with somebody. You know, not everybody's made that switch. There's some people that still want to go see their doctor. Me, I'd rather do a televisit, right? You know, who wants to go down to the doctor if you don't, right? So, you know, I think if I was counseling somebody about defining a target market, is looking at your existing business and where do you do your best work, and where do you find the most reward, and then seeing if that niche is big enough.
Yeah.
One of the concepts that Perry talks about also is a unique, the unique selling proposition. Everybody's heard of that. That's familiar with marketing.
Right.
It's, what makes you different than your competitor. And, the famous example is Domino's when they started, and, their shtick was 30 minutes or it's free, right? Well, the problem with that is that you can easily outdo that. Well, I'll do it in 25 minutes. Okay. So it's unique, but it's not competitive, right? So Perry has this concept of a DSP, which is a definitive sales proposition.
Okay, I'm listening.
And the concept there is around what can you create that no one else can do in the marketplace? And his example, when he first introduced this concept to me, and I was like really kind of having a hard time getting my mind around it, or at least the difference between a definitive sales proposition and a unique sales proposition. He talked about a client of his that was in the placement industry. So a hiring agency, you need somebody to do IT, you go to them and they'll hire somebody and charge you 30% of their salary for the effort, right? Well, the dirty secret in that industry, which I didn't know, is that most of the recruiters have a Rolodex, there's an antiquated term, of 100 or 500 employees, and they would just rotate them. And in other words, they were really players reps. They weren't company reps.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. And so they'd say, well, Chris, I think I can get you a better job. And I go place you over at this company. And then 3 or 4 years later, I'm like, hey, Chris, I got this gig over here for you. Wow. Right. And there was no loyalty to the employer.
Okay.
So this agency designed everything they did, from their marketing to their internal processes, around representing the employer. And their guarantee to the employer was, we will never poach one of the employees that we place with you. That was their guarantee. And so,
which seems very simple.
Right.
That seems common.
Well, right. One of the things that I see, though, which is why I think things like this are so important, is people get in any industry and they talk to others in their industry, and they really get blinders as to what is the acceptable status quo. Absolutely. Right? And so someone from the outside looking in would say, well, that's obvious, but it's not so obvious to the people that are in the weeds on it, right? So, where we've taken that concept is, just a little peek behind the curtain, is one of the things that we do really well in this target market is we have professionals that can communicate and relate and build relationships with these creatives that generally are not comfortable with numbers. I mean, it's an anathema to them a lot of times, right? And so you get your typical accountant, and they're talking over their head. They don't understand the answers that they're getting. It's a technical answer. And what they want to know is something much more digestible. And so the way we recruit, the way we educate our people is focused on those skills. Like, so it's a bunch of soft skills where, accounting firms will traditionally spend all their budget on continuing education of technical updates and how to do this better and that better, which is great. That's, but in our target market, the soft skills are much more important. So that's part of our definitive sales proposition. Now, looking outside into our organization, would you know that? No. I mean, the DSP is not something you post on your website. Okay. It's not something that, someone could reconstruct it if they understood what was behind it. The part that you see as a customer or outside the organization is that marketing and that guarantee piece of we promise not to place anybody we poach anybody that we've placed with you.
Yeah. Well, I know that culture within your organization is something that's huge. It's an amazing culture you developed.
Thank you.
Which came first? Was it you just kind of looked around and noticed that you had this great culture, or you realized maybe where you wanted to go and that, you wanted to reinforce that culture? I've always been curious kind of how that came about and how you motivate and continue to keep that culture as what it is.
Well, a lot of my employees and others have said that we have a great culture. And I would agree with that to an extent. It's not where I want it to be. And I'll explain that in a second. Culture is one of the foundational elements of EOS. So when you start working in EOS, you work for 2 days on what's called the Vision Traction Organizer, which is essentially the business plan. But the very first thing you start with, it's at the top of the VTO, are values. Mm-hmm. Because values persist beyond what you do or how you do it or who you do it with. Values don't change over time. Right. And the exercise we went through with a third-party facilitator was, okay, we are going to restart this company. Who in the organization are you absolutely going to take with you? Okay. Wow. So we start listing these people. And I think at the time there were 22, 23. And then it was, okay, why? What about these people makes you say they have to come with us? And once you get all of that up there, you can start seeing the commonalities and you distill them down to some, words that represent what that is about them. And those become your values. They're not aspirational values. They're not like, the posters you see on a lot of businesses say teamwork or, not that teamwork couldn't be one of your values, but it is who you are. It is not what you want to be. Okay. It's the things that are best about you, obviously. It's not not the negative parts of your culture. But they're values that you generally portray. They're not 100% all the time. So in that way, they may be aspirational, but they're what makes you who you are most of the time. The implementation of those values is where it gets difficult, because you have to start filtering everything through those values.
So you start off looking at those things you want, comfortable or uncomfortable, to go through that process to get to where you have your values listed.
I don't think it was uncomfortable. I think it was actually eye-opening, because I didn't really have any expectation that I recall, but the values that we came up with were like, huh. And I will say in any organization, but definitely in smaller organizations, that the values of the company cannot and are not distinct from the leader or the owner of the organization. In other words, you can't come up with these values that these other people hold that are antithetical to you. That doesn't work. So you have to be comfortable as the leader and the owner with those values. They have to resonate with you.
Sure.
Not to say that those are your personal values, but they have to at least not be inconsistent, okay. Right? But when you start filtering those things around how you hire, how you promote, how you recognize people at work, how you fire people, how you select clients or customers, vendors, what decisions, every decision you make cannot be countercultural.
Right.
I knew that we had something when we fired our first person for not being a culture fit.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't necessarily that they were a bad performer, but they definitely were not a culture fit. And I would say that until you fire somebody for culture, you don't have culture.
When you recognize that, were you able to quickly act on that? Obviously, we hear a lot, fire quickly. Or was it something that, and obviously not knowing the tenure of that person, did it affect your decision at all? Did you struggle with it? Or was it, no, we've committed to this and now we've got to just get it done?
Where it's been difficult, and I can think over the 6 years, there's only been 3 people that we fired for being not culture fits. It was not more difficult than any other decision to fire somebody. It probably felt a little weird because you're not firing this person because they're not doing their job,
okay.
Right? That feels weird. But what's fascinating is once you fire the first person that we fired that was not a culture fit, there were several people that were just like, thank God.
Oh, wow.
Right? Because when you come out with these values and you say, this is who we are, and then people in the organization don't exhibit behavior counter to that, it rings hollow.
Yeah, there's no hiding behind it anymore.
No, there's not. And so once that person was gone, it was like, okay, they're serious about this. This is something that's important. And then 2, well, yeah, that person was an asshole. I don't know why they it was.
It's easy to make it come to light. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, until you make a difficult decision around values, I question whether you're actually living those values.
I love that. That's, yeah. How many companies do we know of or see or hear about who tout their values but never act on them? Yeah.
It's kind of in vogue. Simon Sinek's Start With Why, and this whole concept of why do you exist as an organization, and having those values conversations, that feels good, right? Like it's inspirational. But there's a flip side of it, that if you're not willing to expel the members of the tribe that don't live up to those values, you're not really there. And why I say that I don't think we're where I want to be yet with our culture is those become tribal values. Those are tribal things, and it's no respect of hierarchy. And until I hear somebody tell me personally, Christian, you're not exhibiting this value, we're not where I want to be. They have to be comfortable to be able to call out anybody in the organization to say, you're not exhibiting our value. in this instance. Like, you did this, and I don't think it's consistent with our values. That, to me, when you have that type of accountability around values, that's when you really have culture.
Wow. Okay. That's taking it probably a step further than most people want to. I think most leaders would say they want that, but they have a cutoff in their head of people above this level are supposed to hold me accountable, but you want that to permeate through the entire organization.
100%. And I'm waiting for that day because I know which of our 4 values I don't exhibit all the time. I know it because I've gotten the feedback anonymously. Because part of the EOS model is you have a people analyzer where you analyze everybody in the organization based upon these values once a quarter. And it's a 360 peer thing where anybody that interacts with you gets to opine on whether you display the values or not. And in that process, I know that I've missed the mark on one of those values, but no one's come to me and said, this is an example of you not. And until that happens, then I don't think I'm where we want to be.
We'll make sure to distribute this to the whole team. And
please do. I've told them, but
one thing core groups are obviously successful. 3 locations: Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Lawton. You took this on 6 years ago for EOS. You've incorporated that. I'm curious though, is there anything that you'd be willing to share of maybe something you attempted that didn't work out?
Oh, that list is long. I think, EOS is a perfect example.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So when we started, when I first read Traction, I'd also read Vern Harnish's Rockefeller Habits. Okay. He's since written a sequel to that called Scaling Up. Interesting story. Gino Wickman, who wrote Traction, used to be an acolyte of Vern Harnish's. So there's a lot of similarities in the principles in the 2 books and the 2 systems. I had read both of them, and I tried to implement it in our organization, but I tried to do kind of a hybrid, and we didn't involve anybody from the outside of the organization. And it failed miserably. I mean, I think we did it at least a year, probably closer to 2 years. And then we just gave up on it because I was like, this isn't working. When we brought in a professional to help us implement EOS, which is not a cheap thing to do. They charge, $5, $6, $7 grand a day, right? We worked with them for, I think, 2 years. And I realized through that the reason why we had failed at self-implementation is we had a bunch of problems I didn't know. And I will tell you that the primary thing was there was not trust. And trust is a funny word because trust is highly contextual. I trust that you're not going to pull out a knife and try and stab me, right? Do I trust you with my infant child? I don't know. That's a different level of trust. And to me, trust is in a business context, in an organization, is being able to tell somebody something they don't want to hear without ramifications, without negative ramifications. So I can say, Chris, when you did this, this, and this, I don't think you were exhibiting our values. And you're not going to hold that against me. You're not going to have, it's not going to cost me my job. It's not, And the trust problem in our organization was specifically around the leadership team, of which my brother was part. But it wasn't just him. It was the whole group. I didn't trust them that they would do what they said they would do. I hadn't clarified that way, but that's in hindsight what it was. And they didn't trust me that I wasn't going to change my mind.
Tough place to be.
Right. And the reality was we were both right. Okay. Right? I mean, because what happened? Well, EOS, we tried it. It didn't work. What did I do? Changed my mind. Okay. They would not effect the changes that they had said that they would change or take responsibility for what they said they would take responsibility for. So we were both right. But at the root of it was there wasn't trust. One of my favorite books, and I read it probably once a year at least, is Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And trust is the foundation. That's the first dysfunction of a team, and we were there. That's where we were. We couldn't move up to the communication and accountability and those other things that are above it because we didn't have trust.
Right.
You want more, or you want just that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's this is fantastic. I think the wisdom you have to share is profound, and I think we could sit here for a very long time. However, we don't have a very long time.
Our time is limited.
I got 2 questions here for you. If you could go back to 1997,
okay,
what would you tell young Christian about starting a business?
I don't think it would have anything to do with business. Okay. I think what I tell me is beware the capacity for self-deception.
You've got to expand on that for us now.
Well, one of the things that makes an entrepreneur is they see things that other people don't see. They see the world differently in general. And that the flip side of that is that they oftentimes are not well grounded in reality. Right?
Yeah.
And that, there's no way escaping that. When you are a visionary like Walt Disney, and some of the most fascinating stories I've heard are between Walt and Roy, his brother, because Roy was definitely the realist and Walt was the dreamer. And the details of how are you going to get the money to build this, and who's going to, all the questions that Roy had didn't cross Walt's mind, and Walt didn't care. He had this vision, right? And having somebody in your life that you trust and will listen to, that can be that grounding voice and say, look, I understand the vision, but what you're doing is not going to get you there, and the self-deception part is, well, I start telling myself, Chris doesn't really understand the vision. He doesn't really understand what we're trying to do here. Or Chris is working against me. He doesn't really want me to succeed. Or the rationalization of your own behavior, like, no, this is good, when objectively it's not a good idea. So the power of self-deception is what I would warn my younger self about.
I love it. Good. So as we wrap up, one question we always ask, what's one piece of technology you can't live without?
Well, you tried, you earlier you were going to email me, and I said, well, I don't have email on my phone, and that's a conscious choice. I took all of my business applications off of my phone. When I got a new phone last year, I took it off, and it was intentional because I realized that it was just a time suck. It was not productive. Technology, I'm kind of in this mode of wanting to regress, as opposed to progress. But The idea that you have inside your hand access and capacity via this small computer that you would never have dreamed about 10 years ago is an extremely powerful tool. So I say my phone, but I do that with reservation.
Okay, fair enough. Christian, thank you. If anybody would like to get in touch with you to follow up, either personally or to learn more about Core Group and the services that they offer, how should they do that?
Well, you can email me at cbrim@coregroupus.com. That is the domain of our website if you want to check us out. I'd give you my cell phone, but I don't know what pranksters would.
I encourage you not to.
Yeah.
So perfect. Good. Well, thank you again. This has been fantastic.
You bet. My pleasure.
Delightful having you here. And
thank you
to
for
all of you
inviting me
out there in the world listening, thank you for listening. We'll do it again sometime soon.
The Oklahoma Business Show is proudly sponsored by Your IT, managed IT services and cybersecurity for Oklahoma businesses. Are you a business leader who's frustrated with your current technology, worried about cyber threats, and too damn busy to handle it yourself? Your IT makes IT easy, with clear and transparent pricing and the ability to customize services to fit your unique business needs. Visit yourit.com to learn more about our services and schedule a chat to find out how we can help you. That's yourit.com. You deserve better IT.